At midday, the mountains look almost kind. The sky is a hard, washed-out blue, the snow beneath it a mirror that fights the eyes. Wind has combed the basin into long, shallow drifts, the surface whipped smooth except where rock teeth break through like dark knuckles. There are no trees, no brush, nothing tall enough to hide behind. Just white and stone, and 6 men cutting a line through the middle of it. They move in staggered file, 15 meters spacing, rifles slung at a low ready. Every bootprint stamps a dark bruise into the snow, a line of confession that says, "We came this way. We are going that way. We have no better choice." Gage is on point because he's good at it and because he likes it. He's humming something under his breath through a wool balaclava, a song no one else can hear over the wind. Behind him, Harker Lopez with his pack slightly higher, binos slung. Mason and Ward complete the shooting element. Reyes carries the med kit heavy on one side, and Senior Chief Dalton moves last, where he can see them all. Dalton scans the ridge line, then the scatter of boulders on the basin's right flank. His brain is a constant overlay of geometry. Angles, distances, lines of fire. He doesn't like this place. No cover, too clean, but the route options in this terrain are limited, and the mission clock is not. Gage steps between 2 sculpted drifts, turning his head slightly to track the sensor sight on the far spur. The shot takes him mid-step. It comes from nowhere and everywhere, the crack sharp and flat in the thin air. One moment Gage is moving, the next his body jolts as if an invisible rope yanked him backward. His rifle slides off his shoulder. His knees buckle, and he drops into the snow with an awful softness, like the mountain is catching him. There's a heartbeat of silence, the world holding its breath. Then it explodes. "Contact!" Harker shouts, dropping to a knee, rifle swinging up toward the left-hand ridge on instinct. Mason and Ward follow, muzzles flashing. The shots go wide, blind toward high ground washed in glare. Snow spits and jumps where their rounds land, gray puffs against white. They're firing an impression, not targets. High left. Maybe right. Shit, we're bracketed. Ward's voice cracks over the local net. Dalton is already going prone, rifle tucked in, eyes trying to track anything, heat shimmer, muzzle flash, a silhouette. There's too much light, the sun reflecting off every slope and drift, turning edges into haze. "Gage, move," he barks. There's no answer. "Gage." Reyes is already sliding forward, using the time between cracks, medical pack dragging a crooked trench. Dalton's gloved hand finds his headset switch and toggles long range. "Saber actual, this is Echo 2-1. Troops in contact, grid." Static answers. Not normal static. A thick, smothering hiss that doesn't leave space for a human voice to live in. He shifts to another channel, then to another. The same compressing white noise. He snatches the backup handset off his chest rig, hits power, waits for the handshake. Nothing. The little screen blinks, hunts dies. His stomach goes cold. "We're not alone out here by accident." "Comms are cut," he snarls. "We are jammed. Keep your traffic local." As if on cue, the ridge line speaks. A short, controlled burst rips across the basin from the left, tracers stitching the air just above their heads, walking deliberately toward them. At almost the same moment, a single crack from the right flank kicks snow at Ward's boots, a round neatly placed between him and the nearest rock tooth. Dalton's brain maps it, rifle on the right correcting their movement, machine gun on the left controlling it. Crossfire. Kill box. Down, he roars, even though everyone is already pressing themselves into the snow as if they might somehow sink into it. Reyes reaches Gage and rolls him just enough to see the entry wound high in the chest, a dark flower in tan fabric. Another round snaps overhead, and he flinches, dropping flat, hand still clamped on Gage's harness. "Can you move him?" Dalton calls. "Not without getting ventilated." Reyes snaps back. He's got a pulse. For now. A deeper thunk rolls across the basin a second before Dalton recognizes it. "RPG," he shouts. "Heads." The warhead detonates in the air, 3 meters above the drift line, kicked high by a practiced hand. The blast punches down in a cone, shredding surface snow into a storm and hurling shrapnel like throw knives. Mason cries out a short, shock sound, then bites it off. His left sleeve blossoms red, and he collapses onto his side, fingers clawing at the snow. Shards hiss into the drift beyond Dalton, stitching the white with tiny black specks. One fragment slices across his rucksack, hot and indifferent. "Smoke!" Harker yells, already fishing a canister from his vest. "Wait!" Dalton starts, but the spoon is already flipped, the can already spinning out into the open. It hits, hisses, billows gray that the wind snatches and smears into nothing before it has a chance to be a wall. Instead of cover, it creates a mess of moving shadow that obscures their view and probably paints them more clearly to anyone with thermal. The solution becomes another problem. Make it count. Dalton snarls anyway, because there's no undo button. Short bursts. Pick your lanes. They drag. Reyes grabs Gage's harness and pulls, legs churning, body half-crawling, half-lunging. Harker scrambles up, grabs Gage's legs. Together they drag him toward a slight rise in the snow, a low berm built where wind has piled drifts against an invisible contour. Dalton throws himself beside them, shouldering into the snow to carve a shallow depression, building his own cover one shovel scoop of forearm at a time. The berm rises maybe a foot above the basin floor. It feels like hiding behind a line drawn on a piece of paper. The enemy doesn't let them forget it. The crew serve gun on the left resumes, this time with shorter, more precise bursts. The rounds hammer the berm top, chewing it down. Each burst sends a spray of powder and granular ice into their faces. The front edge of the cover erodes with every heartbeat. "Rourke, where's that fire coming from?" Dalton demands, not taking his eyes off his sight picture even though he can't see anything but indistinct rock and sun blast. There's a pause, a calm voice in the chaos. Left ridgeline, 2 degrees below skyline, behind that triple rock stack. Gun on low tripod, probably belt-fed. Right flank shooter using the isolated boulder cluster, 30 degrees off our current axis. Range 950 to 1,000. Good glass, good discipline. He spares half a second to glance at her. She's a smear of camo and snow at the berm's far end, face hidden behind goggles and balaclava, rifle tucked in, barrel just peeking above the lip. Her posture is compact, relaxed in a way that doesn't fit the storm around them. Calm versus chaos in human form. Another RPG thumps, another airburst detonates over their old position, shrapnel raining down where Gage lay seconds before. Dalton feels the air punch, but no sharp bite this time. "Ward, Mason can serve," he barks. "We're not going to win this by painting the snow." Mason's answering grunt is more wounded animal than man, but his rifle fire cuts down to short, disciplined breaks. Blood drips from his fingertips into the snow, each drop a tiny dark coin. Dalton's mind races through checklist options. Call air? No comms. Pop more smoke? Pointless. Push toward the ridge? That's suicide. Fall back. The gun and rifle will cut them to pieces in the open. They're borrowed men in borrowed time. Then, as the crew serve gun strides another neat line of bullets toward the berm, something interrupts the pattern. 3 shots. Crack. Crack. And then, after a measured breath, crack. They're different from the others. Harder to place, sharper in his ear, the report somehow cleaner. The spacing between them is almost casual, as if the person firing has a metronome where other people have adrenaline. The enemy's gun coughs once more and stops. For a moment, Dalton thinks the operator is just shifting position. Then a dark shape topples away from the rock by the triple stack, sliding down the slope in a spray of snow. Even at distance, through glare and distortion, Dalton can tell that man is not getting up again. A second body, near where the RPG team has been sheltering, jerks and folds. The launcher slips from limp hands and clatters down the incline. A third shot reaches out and finds a figure huddled over a radio set near the ridge. The man flops sideways, headset flying. The antenna wobbles and goes still. Up on the basin's right flank, the disciplined rifle that's been controlling their lateral movement falls silent, as though someone just unplugged it. The sound in the basin changes. Gunfire doesn't stop entirely, but the shape of it breaks, short, scattered bursts, a confusion of uncoordinated noise where there was once a coherent design. Dalton lifts his head an inch above the berm, scanning for a muzzle flash, a new position, anything that might tell him where those saving shots came from. He sees nothing. No flash. No telltale swirl of disturbed snow. No silhouette framed against the skyline. The wind steals echoes, tumbling the sound around the basin until it might as well have come from everywhere and nowhere. Who the hell? Ward breathes. Dalton doesn't answer. He's too busy tracing angles. The gunner dropped from behind the triple rock stack. The RPG man from small scoop further right. The radio operator from a dented depression just below the crest. 3 shots, 3 force multipliers pulled off the board. It's surgical. It's weird. He follows the imaginary line back, not to the opposite ridge, where a sane sniper would set up, but lower. Closer. Beneath. As another uneasy silence drifts across the basin, Dalton realizes the help isn't coming from above or from their rear. It's coming from an angle that should be impossible. From under the enemy's feet. From someone who knew, before they ever stepped into this bowl, exactly how it could kill them, and how to break it. 18 hours earlier, the world is smaller, confined to plywood walls and stale air. The forward staging hut sits near a high pass, half buried in snow, held down by cables and stubbornness. Inside, the air smells like damp gear and diesel fumes. A little steel stove in the corner ticks and pops, trying to bully the cold out. It fails, but no one complains. Complaining wastes heat. Boots thump against the floor. Velcro rips. A helicopter passes somewhere out in the valley, its rotors a distant, soothing thunder. Dalton stands bent over a laminated map spread across a folding table. A red lens flashlight casts everything in Mars red. Contour lines group and twist, little rivers of ink. On one of the ridge lines, a tiny square is drawn in, annotated with shorthand. The sensor site. He taps it with a gloved finger. 3 days dark. No scheduled maintenance. No weather event on satellite imagery that should have taken it offline. No friendly patrols in the area in that time window. Harker, his spotter, leans in. Equipment failure? Could be. Dalton flips open a second folder, the kind with extra staples and a more serious weight. But this particular node is wired into more than just local eyes. It's been pulling intercept slices on valley traffic for months. If someone hit it knowing what it is, he lets that trail off. Reyes, sitting on a crate with his med kit laid open like a surgeon's tray, whistles under his breath. Then the bad guys just stole themselves a library. Or tried. Dalton nods. There's a data module inside the housing. If it's gone, we assume compromise. If it's still there, we either bring it back or make sure no one else ever does. Either way, we need eyes on. The team arrayed around the table is compact and capable. Harker, calm and methodical. Mason and Ward, shooters with enough experience to be dangerous but not enough to be jaded. Reyes, eyes always flicking to everyone's hands, everyone's faces, cataloging stress like another vital sign. And then there's the new one. Rourke stands slightly off to the side, helmet tucked beneath her arm. She's not tall, not broad, but she carries herself with the kind of unforced balance that says her body goes where her mind tells it. No more, no less. Dark hair is braided tight and coiled at the nape of her neck. Her uniform is standard. Her presence is not. Ward glances at her, then at Dalton. So this is our new ad. Dalton doesn't look up from the map. Sniper attachment from the other element. Qualified and recommended. Sure, Ward's tone is light, but there's a trace of skepticism underneath. We said we needed speed, Chief, not experiments. There's no venom in it. No overt disrespect. Just doubt baked into habit, the way a muscle memory refuses to trust a new motion. Rourke doesn't flinch. She doesn't bother to force a smile or a quip. She directs her attention to the map, waiting for the information instead of the approval. Dalton flicks his eyes her way. You've read the packet. Yes, Chief. He taps the route leading from their hut to the sensor site. Talk me through it. She steps in, gloved fingertips resting on the laminated surface to steady against the hut's slight shudder. Midday movement through the basin, she says, tracing the line. We avoid the worst of the night, ice on the pass. Keep avalanche risk down. But the snow surface will be hard and loud. Visibility's extreme. Glare's going to wash out definition, especially along that bowl. She circles a section on the far side of the pass, where the contour lines open up into a shallow depression between two ridge shoulders. This basin is a problem, she continues. High ground on both flanks, no cover. Our tracks will be visible from the moment we enter until the moment we leave. If someone's watching, they get a clear view of our approach, our numbers, our pace. Ward snorts. So we move fast. Don't give him time to set up. Rourke's gaze flicks to him, then back to the map. If I wanted to trap a six-man element with limited support, I'd pick that bowl. Crossfire from both ridges, crew served on one side, precision shooter on the other. Force them into the open. Kill box. Harker raises a brow. You always plan the enemy's best day, in this much detail. She shrugs once. Saves time later. Dalton watches the exchange without comment. He notes how she doesn't try to soften her answer, doesn't check the room for approval. Just states facts. Comms. Reyes asks. We get a clean shot at long range. On paper, Dalton says. But these peaks choose signals. We'll be bouncing off repeaters. If someone knows our tech profile and wants to get cute, they could do some damage. Rourke shifts her rifle on its sling, hesitates. I was in the comms room during the last test burst, she says quietly. There was a hum. Dalton frowns. A hum. Not noise. Pattern. She draws a short, flat line in the air with two fingers. Like an engine idling in the transmission. Faded in, faded out. Timing was deliberate. Harker waves a hand. Terrain reflections. We get weird echoes out here all the time. Maybe, she says. Didn't sound like it. Noted, Dalton cuts in, shutting down the debate without dismissing the data. We go in assuming our long-range link can be cut or dirted. Local net primary, hand signals backup. We bring extra batteries and spare handsets, but we don't rely on miracles. Or anyone else getting to us fast. He looks at Rourke again. You've run in this environment before? Yes, Chief. Where? She hesitates, just a fraction, then answers. In training. And once in country. Different range. Same rules. He senses more beneath that, something not in her service file. He files it away. He's got a mission to plan, not a biography to unpack. Gear is checked with the usual mixture of ritual and practicality. Mason cycles his bolt more times than necessary. Ward recounts magazines, lips moving silently. Reyes organizes his medkit, so every item is where his hand expects it. Rourke moves through her own checklist with quiet efficiency. Optic flushed and clean. Sling adjusted. Range card laminated and folded to show the basin and surrounding heights. Batteries pressed into inner pockets where body heat can keep them alive longer. Then, almost as an afterthought, she digs into the bottom of her ruck and pulls out a small, scratched metal compass on a lanyard. The casing is old, the kind that's seen decades and owners. She holds it in her gloved palm for a moment, thumb rubbing a groove that looks worn by years. She slips it into the chest pocket of her plate carrier, where it sits against her like a second heartbeat. Harker notices. Going analog, huh? She gives him a mild look. Satellites fall. Batteries die. Iron doesn't care. He chuckles. You and Dalton will get along fine. Outside, dawn is a pale smudge behind the mountains when they step into the cold. Breath fogs. Snow squeaks under their boots. The hut door thumps shut behind them, and for a while the world is just their own breathing and the crunch of their advance. As the sun climbs, the snow brightens from dull gray to shocking white. Sunglasses go on, goggles pulled down. Shadows shrink. The mountains loom, ridges knife-sharp, valleys deep and blue. They move mostly in daylight, threading the pass, skirting cornices that look ready to fall. The avalanche risk is low today, but risk in this terrain is never zero. Dalton watches the slopes above as much as he watches the path ahead. Rourke walks in the middle third of the formation, not quite central, not quite peripheral. Useful but not crucial, at least on the whiteboard. just in case, one of the officers had said when they attached her. Nice to have the option. She feels the weight of that phrase the way she feels the weight of her rifle. Not as insult, as information. At one point on the climb, as they contour along a ridge, she pauses. Brief, almost imperceptible. The others keep moving, boots crunching, packs swaying. She tilts her head, listening. Wind hisses between rocks. Somewhere, high above, ice pops in a crack. And beneath that, faint but distinct, she hears a metallic clink. Not rock on rock. Metal. Regular. Repeated, like something being adjusted or reseated. She looks up toward the basin they'll cross in a few hours. The sound is coming from that direction. She says nothing. What's she going to say? I heard something. In this world, things are always making noise. Instead, she logs it, files it beside the pattern hum in the comms test and the bowl on the map she's circled. As they crest the final rise before the basin, midday light hits them full on. The snowfield spreads below, huge and open, bordered by ridge shoulders that look far too interested in their approach. The sensor sight is a dark smudge in the distance, perched on its spur, a tooth in the jaw of the mountain. The others study it, adjust goggles, murmur over the net. Rourke lingers half a step back, turning her head to trace the lines of the ridges instead. She sees rock stacks where a gun could hide, snow gullies that could funnel in advance, shadow pockets that hold secrets. She sees the fight before it starts, and she knows, with a little twist of cold in her gut, that they are walking into something designed. The basin looks exactly the way it did on the map. That's the first problem. Snow bowl. Ridge on the left, ridge on the right, sensor spur dead ahead. No surprises. No obvious disturbances. Which means any wrongness here is buried, not broadcast. The team fans out slightly as they enter, maintaining spacing. Frosted breath plumes behind balaclavas. Rifles track the arcs they've been assigned. Feet sink a few inches in a hard crust with every step. Dalton feels exposed in a way that sits behind his heart like a hand. He forces his shoulders loose, his grip relaxed, because tension leads to mistakes. Eyes up. Harker murmurs, glass up. Sight looks off. He's right. Even at distance, the sensor housing shows damage that reads wrong. The outer casing is peeled back, not shattered. Panels are removed in neat, prying arcs. Wires dangle, but not haphazardly. It looks like something that's been opened, not broken. Could still be weather that hit it first. Then scavengers, Reyes offers, because optimism is part of his job. Or somebody who knew exactly what they were looking for, Rourke says. Her voice is low, almost lost to the wind. Dalton files that and keeps them moving. His plan is simple. Reach a vantage point on the near side of the basin, glass the site properly, then finalize whether they're going closer or calling for a denial strike. He doesn't get the chance. The first shot drops gauge again. Now, with the cruel clarity of déjà vu, Dalton watches his lead man jerk and fall through the crosshairs of his memory, and has just enough time to think we were right before the world comes apart. Unlike the cold open, there's context now. The shot is precise center mass, not a graze or a wild miss. It's meant to stop movement, freeze the column in the most vulnerable position. Contact front. Harker calls, diving to a knee, rifle barking. High left. Ward adds, even though he can't see the shooter. It's an instinctive assignment based on where the sound feels like it came from. Dalton hits the ground, rolling to a prone behind the slightest rise in the snow. His cheek finds stock, his eye finds optic, but all he gets is glare and blur. He taps his radio, switching from local to long. Saber actual, 2-1, troops in contact. The response sizzles into his ear. Not the usual ragged hiss of distance, but a thick, uniform wall of noise that makes his teeth vibrate. He tries again, different channel, different frequency. Same poison silence. He flips to the backup, thumb stabbing the transmit button. The handset doesn't even find a network to fail against. It just sits in his palm, dumb and dead. Long range gone, he snaps. Somebody's sitting on our pipe. On cue, the ridge shoulders wake in staggered brilliance. From the left, the crew-served gun speaks, a deeper, throatier chatter that he feels in his ribcage. The rounds cut a line in front of them, then behind, checking the bracket, measuring their reaction. On the right, A bolt action or designated marksman rifle cracks in patient cadence, punching the snow near their only obvious retreat path. Constraint 1. Terrain. They're in the worst place at the worst moment, in the exact geometry Rourke predicted. High ground owned, low ground punished, limited lateral options. Constraint 2. Comms. Their lifeline to air, to quick reaction, to anyone else on the planet, severed not by chance but by design. Gage lies motionless. Reyes shoves forward, driven by training and something more stubborn. Stay down. Dalton barks. Reyes doesn't even pretend to listen. If he's savable, we don't let him bleed out in the open, Chief. The corpseman throws himself into a low, stumbling sprint, then drops to a slide next to Gage. He's instantly working, gloved fingers searching for an exit wound, other hand yanking tourniquets from his kit. Every second he spins upright is a second the enemy can choose to take his life. Dalton wants to tell him to abandon it, to preserve what's left. But he hears the unspoken rule in Reyes's voice. You don't leave someone to die on their face in the snow if you can help it. He grinds his teeth. Cover him. Mason and Ward oblige, even though every round they send is one they might wish for later. They lay down fire in Ward's assigned lane toward the boulders on the right. Snow explodes along the rock face. A shadow jerks back, then reappears in a different crevice, still patient. Constraint 3. Casualty. Gage's body is both moral obligation and tactical anchor. Reyes is chained to him by profession and loyalty. Another shot cracks, and Mason grunts. Shrapnel from a near miss slices into his upper arm, knocking him sideways. Blood spills bright onto the snow. He rolls into the shallow depression they've found and presses his elbow to his ribs, forcing himself not to clutch at the wound like a novice. You still in it? Dalton snaps. Mason bares his teeth. I'm fine. He isn't, but he can still shoot. That's enough for now. Their initial fire has already eaten through a third of their immediate magazines. It takes a conscious decision to stop reflexively squeezing the trigger upon seeing any movement. Constraint 4. Ammo. On a good day, they're resupplied by air. On this day, there's no good in that equation. They carry what they carry. The enemy uses RPG airbursts like punctuation, each one a thunderclap that drives their faces into the snow and showers them with ice and razor fragments. Whoever is running the tube knows their timing and their fusing. This isn't some goat herder with a lucky shot, Ward mutters, mostly to himself. The team leader tries textbook responses. Smoke. It fails. Bounding overwatch. There is nowhere safer to bound to. Suppressive fire. You can't suppress ghosts. Rourke lies almost completely still. Between bursts, she listens. The gun on the left cycles through belts with steady discipline. The rifle on the right adjusts between shots with minute shifts, trying to get a better angle on their berm. Her optic fogs at the edges, warmth from her face condensing on cold glass. She wipes it once, quickly, but every breath threatens to bloom another soft blur across her view. She adjusts the scope's brightness down to cut some glare, sacrificing visibility and shadows. She counts seconds between RPG launches, tracks the time between mortar thunks she hasn't heard yet, but dreads. She notes that the rounds are landing close enough to scare, not always close enough to eviscerate. They're being pinned, not erased. Her gaze catches on the Shepherd hut-off axis, half buried near the basin's edge. Smoke stains the pipe. Whoever lives there, if anyone, is probably huddled inside, listening to the world come apart. They cannot, ethically or politically, simply arc fire across the whole ridge and accept what falls. Moral constraint. The wind whistles, picking up grains of snow and turning them into ground-level mist. Above them, where the pass they crossed this morning cuts between peaks, a faint curl of blown snow hangs. Weather is shifting, temperature dropping, cloud cover creeping over distant summits. There's the other clock, the one that doesn't wear a watch. If they don't get out before that pass fills or ices, extraction goes from difficult to mythic. All right, Dalton mutters as another burst walks the berm. Options. He thinks them through in brutal shorthand. Stay, die here. Push, die faster, farther out. Fall back, Die in the open, backs turned. None of those are acceptable. He glances sideways to where Rourke lies, cheek pressed to stock, gaze fixed not on the basin but on the rock face above it. Her stillness isn't resignation. It's the kind of stillness that happens when math is being done under fire. The berm is shrinking by centimeters you can feel. Every burst from the crew-served carves more the snow away, sending showers of white into their collars, their hoods, down the backs of their necks. The hiss and crackle of bullets through frozen crust is a constant, needling sound. Dalton slides along the berm to check Reyes. The corpsman has gauge rolled just enough to work, gloved hands glossy with blood. A pressure bandage blooms under his palms. Gage's face is waxy, eyes half-lidded, breath a shallow flutter. "Talk to me," Dalton says. "Hit high." Reyes answers, not looking up. "Lung. Maybe more. He needs a bird and a surgeon, and he's got neither. I can slow the leak. Can't stop the drowning. Keep him alive," Dalton says. "That's an order." He doesn't add as long as you can. He doesn't need to. Rourke edges into his peripheral vision. She doesn't interrupt Reyes, doesn't undercut. When Dalton looks at her fully, her goggles are streaked, her balaclava crusted with blown ice. "We're not going to win this by trading lanes," she says. Her voice is quiet, but in the cramped terror of the berm, it feels loud. "Appreciate the assessment," Dalton grunts. "You got something else in mind?" "Yes." He waits. She doesn't launch into a speech. She picks her words like she picks shots. "We changed the angle," she says. "They own the ridges. They own the bowl. They think that's all the geometry that matters. So we give them a new line they didn't plan for. Their gun and their sniper both have us dialed." Ward cuts in, not bothering to hide his frustration. "Last thing we need is someone skylining herself, trying to be a hero." "I'm not going up," Rourke says. "I'm going under." Dalton's eyes narrow behind his goggles. "Under." She jerks her chin toward a fracture line in the ridge, the shadow of a narrow rock spine that juts from the basin wall, then disappears into a crease. "There's a spine there," she says. "You can't see it from here, but it connects to a shelf beneath their crest. From that shelf, there's room for one person to crawl into the undercut below their line. They're set to watch the opposite ridge and the basin. No one expects fire from directly under their own boots." Dalton glances that way. From where he lies, the ridge face is a solid wall of white and stone. He's climbed enough of these mountains to know that what looks sheer from one angle often hides ledges from another. The idea is insane. It also smells right. "How far?" he asks. 300 meters to the spine," she answers without hesitation. "Then another 100 along it. Then crawl. Call it 500 total, with the worst bits at the end. Exposed at first. Then invisible if I make it." Dalton runs the numbers in his head. "Under fire. With wind picking up. With our visibility going to shit." "Wind works both ways," she says. "They'll be fighting glare and blown snow same as we are. You pour fire into the positions they think we'll move to. I move where they don't think to look." He doesn't like sending anyone off alone. He likes sending the one operator some of his men still quietly doubt even less. "Give me 2 minutes of noise," she adds. Her tone doesn't change, but the words land like a challenge. "I'll buy you 10 of silence." Ward scoffs softly. That's a hell of a sales pitch. Dalton doesn't look at him. He looks at her. Her body language is steady. Her breathing hasn't spiked. She's not asking for permission to do something reckless to impress anyone. She's presenting the only solution that isn't a slow bleed. "Okay," he says. 2 minutes. We'll draw their eyes and their sight lines. You move on my mark. You don't overextend. You can't fix this if you're dead." She dips her head once. "Deal." She begins stripped down with swift, economical movements. She removes one full magazine from her pouch, hands it to Ward. Another to Mason. Keeps enough to work her ladder if she gets there. Anything that rattles goes. A spare tool, a half-empty water bottle that sloshes. The compass she keeps, tucking it deeper in her chest pocket where it won't swing. "Why that thing?" Reyes asks, glancing up from Gage just long enough to notice. "You think we're getting lost?" "I think I've seen weather eat signals and batteries in an hour," she says. "I've seen people stare at a dead screen and wait for it to come back while the world moved on without them. I'm not doing that again. There's something in the way she says again that suggests a story with a bad ending. There's no time for it now. The wind picks up another notch. Loose snow begins to skim across the basin in a low, ghostly river. Visibility collapses in waves, then widens again, then collapses. It's like watching the world breathe. Constraint 5, visibility. Good for ghosts, bad for everyone else. Her optic fogs again at the edges when she breathes. She wipes it, but the condensation returns as soon as she settles into position. She considers, then flips the scope to a lower magnification, dials down brightness to reduce glare. It's a compromise. Life now is compromise. Constraint 6, equipment reliability. The precision glass she loves is now a liability. She prepares to run partial irons, half-trusting muscle memory and her own internal ballistics chart. On me, Dalton calls. On my count, we go loud. Think of it as throwing a blanket over their eyes. Make the blanket convincing. He meets Rourke's gaze one last time. You get in and it looks wrong, you back out. That's an order. I don't care how good your shot is from a place they can collapse on top of you. We're already in the wrong place, she says. Might as well be the wrong place they don't expect. He almost smiles at that. Almost. 3, he says, raising his hand. 2, 1, send it. The berm explodes into sound. Ward and Mason lean into their rifles, sending controlled strings into the rock stacks they've half-identified as threats. Harker joins in, his shots a drumbeat counterpoint. Dalton adds the weight of his weapon, targeting the right-hand boulders, giving the enemy something sharp to look at. Rourke slides off the berm and becomes nothing. She keeps her body as low as physics allows, elbows and knees driving through the crust. Every movement is timed to coincide with another burst from her team, the noise covering the crunch of her passage. She angles toward the shadow line she'd identified, the start of the narrow rock spine that snakes from basin floor to ridge. The first 100 meters are exposed hell, but the wind is her co-conspirator. Each gust throws a curtain of powder into the air, obscuring shapes from casual glances. Through her goggles, the world is a strobing mess of whiteout and definition. She reaches the base of the spine and pauses, chest heaving, not from panic but from exertion. She forces her breathing slow. Panic breath is loud breath, and loud breath fogs optics. The spine is steep and narrow, a jagged fin of rock poking out of the slope. Snow clings to its windward side in a thin sheet of ice. The lee side drops away into a shallow chute that tumbles toward unseen rocks. She hooks gloved fingers into cracks, boots edging for purchase. Her rifle is slung tight across her back now, tied down so it won't swing and betray her. Up close, the rock is cold and slick. Twice her boot slips and her stomach drops, but she keeps 3 points of contact at all times. This is not a climb for style. It's a climb for survival. She hauls herself along the spine in careful, crouched steps, moving sideways more often than up. The basin shrinks beneath her, the team shapes compressing into dark splotches against the berm. A shot snaps off the rock near her calf and chips granite into her boot. Someone fired in her vague direction. Whether they saw her or got lucky, she can't tell. She presses herself tight against the stone and waits, becoming surface. The wind gusts again, snow slithering over the ridge, filling the air with silver dust. After a slow count, she moves. She reaches the transitional zone where rock meets undercut. The spine narrows to a perch barely wider than her hips. Beyond it, the ridge face curves inward, an overhang, a shallow cave created by erosion. She flattens, belly to rock, and begins to worm herself into the undercut. Her world shrinks to inches. Stone presses against her shoulder blades and ribs. Snow trickles down her neck. At one point, she dislodges a small fan of frozen powder. It slides down the slope with a soft SSH that might as well be a thunderclap. She freezes completely. The noise from the fight washes over her, distant cracks and booms, but up here, any new sound matters. She counts breaths. 1, 2, 10. No one leans over the ridge lip. No new angle of gunfire rakes her hiding place. The wind takes her mistake and erases it. She moves again. At last, she reaches the micro-ledge she'd glimpsed through binos the night before. It's no bigger than a pickup bed, tucked under the ridge lip, invisible from below, uninteresting from above. Just another wrinkle in a very old face. She unslings her rifle and nestles into position with the ease of long practice. The stone around the crack she'll shoot through is rough against her cheek. She uses her pack as a rest, wedges it solid, settles the far end. Through the narrow gap, she has a sliver view of the enemy world. The jammer sits tucked against a boulder, wires snaking into a box with mismatched knobs and dials. A man in a knit cap leans over it, gloved hands adjusting settings with proprietary care. Beside him, an observer with binoculars glued to his eyes pops his head up to scan the basin, then ducks to shout corrections to unseen shooters. And in the lee of a bigger rock, a man stands with an air of ownership. He's not the largest or the most heavily armed, but his posture marks him as the one giving commands. He speaks into a handset, gestures with short, economical motions, directed even now in the heat of the engagement. He looks like someone who has practiced this. Not here, maybe, but somewhere. Upwind, she can smell their burned propellant drifting back, a faint metallic tang on the cold air. Down in the basin, Dalton and the others are still pouring fire into shapes they can barely see. Every shot they fire is weight she needs to convert into leverage. Rourke closes her eyes for a heartbeat, aligning the mental map she's built with the physical one in her scope. When she opens them, her world has shrunk to crosshairs, breath, distance, and the quiet conviction that this is exactly the position she was built for. She settles her finger on the trigger and starts turning their kill box inside out. Rourke does the math as she watches. She counts roughly. Number of shooters on each flank, the rate of the crew serves belt changes, the time between RPG launches. Each observation feeds into a quiet, ruthless calculus. You don't shoot the closest target first. You shoot the ones that make all the other targets dangerous. First priority, the jammer. As long as that box hums, Dalton is fighting blind to the wider fight. Second, the observer. He's the eyes that connect impacts to corrections. Third, RPG team. They own the vertical. They make the berm meaningless. Fourth, crew serve gun. As soon as the team moves, that gun will be the executioner. Fifth, the commander, if she can get him. Cut the head off the snake, and panic does the rest. The jammer operator leans in, head bent, hand reaching to tweak a knob. For the first time, his torso breaks the cover line of his boulder, presenting center mass. Rourke's crosshairs settle just below his shoulder, accounting for the angle of the gap she's shooting through. The wind here does strange things, coming over the ridge and curling. She tracks a bit left, reading the flutter of a scrap of cloth tied to a rock. She exhales halfway, squeezes. The rifle bucks gently into her shoulder. The operator jerks, as if the mountain just shrugged him off. He falls sideways, shoulder slamming into the jammer box. The device tips, cables pulling taut. Something inside pops with a sharp, electric crack. The hum she couldn't hear from here, but felt in her teeth when they crossed the basin, stops. Down in the bowl, Dalton's long-dead net springs to life for a heartbeat, a clipped fragment of outside voice punching through. 2-1, say sit rep read. Then static returns, but thinner now. The wall has cracks. Dalton's eyes widen. Somebody just hit their jammer, he growls. Us? Ward asks. That wasn't us, Dalton says. We're too busy not dying. Rourke shifts her aim to the observer. He's still processing the fall of his comrade. Binoculars lowering, mouth opening to shout. She put a round just under his jaw, where scarf meets skin. The recoil snaps against her shoulder. The observer's head snaps back, then forward, chin hitting his chest. He crumples onto the device, and the dead operator, glass clattering from his fingers. Immediately, the enemy fire pattern changes. Shots that had been landing with surgical regularity now scatter. One bursts from a ridge, chews harmlessly into empty snow 10 meters shore of the berm. Another flies high. The crew-served gun hesitates, swinging searchingly instead of striding with purpose. RPG timing slips. The next warhead detonates too early, harmlessly shredding air well above their last known position. Dalton hears the difference the way sailors hear the sea. They lost their spotter, he breathes. That's our ghost. He doesn't know where the ghost is, but he knows what she's doing. Up on the ridge, Rourke's view is a narrow tunnel, but it's enough. She tracks right, finds the RPG team. 2 men, one shouldering the tube, one fishing around from a pack. They're crouched behind a rock that protects them from direct basin fire, but leaves their upper bodies visible from her angle. She waits until the gunner lifts the tube, exposing the curve of his helmet. One shot. He folds backward, the launcher half-shouldered. The spotter gapes, reaching for him, and then bolts, leaving the tube to clatter away. No more airbursts. The vertical threat ends with a single pull of her finger. Her chest rises and falls slowly. She keeps her tempo. Panic makes people shoot too fast and miss easy targets. She can't afford either. Her eye goes hunting for the crew served. The gun is mounted low behind a rock lip, its barrel poking through a slot carved in the snow and stone. 2 men work it, a gunner and a feeder. They're not as exposed as the others. They've built themselves a little fortress. She can't see the gunner's full body, but she can see hands, see part of his head, see the small, regular movements of someone settling in. The feeder leans forward to slap a new belt into place. She takes him first. The round punches through his side and hurls him into the gunner. They tangle. The belt tears from his hand and falls into the snow. The barrel tilts. The next burst chews uselessly into the ridge face. The gunner shoves his dead comrade away, then hesitates, suddenly alone with a weapon that is now a beacon and a death trap. He ducks out of sight, and the gun falls silent. It might come back, but for now, its absence is everything. The center line of fire in the basin is gone. The pin has been knocked out of the hinge. Dalton feels the moment like a shift in gravity. Movement! Ward yells. Their guns down. Dalton doesn't hesitate. Now, Harker, Ward, you're on rear security and covering fire. Reyes, you, and Mason drag gauge, and yourself. We're going to that fold. 2 o'clock, 50 meters. We get there, we live longer. There's no more time for perfection. They move. Ward and Harker rise into crouches and lay down measured suppressive fire, targeting the last places they saw muzzle flashes. Dalton grabs Gage's harness alongside Reyes. Mason, pale and sweating, gets his feet under him and pushes his wounded arm lashed to his chest with an improvised sling. They lurch out from behind the berm, legs churning, hunched as if they can make themselves thin enough to dodge the bullets that will surely come. Rourke tracks them through her tiny window, but they're not her problem right now. Her eye finds the commander. He is standing now outside his rock because leaders like him need to see. His handset is still in his hand. He's shouting, gesturing, trying to salvage structure out of sudden chaos. He's clever. She can see the movements. He's already trying to red-ass shooters to get someone else on the spotting roll. If he succeeds, the window closes. She centers her crosshairs on the small triangle where throat meets collar, accounting for distance, wind, and the slight distortion caused by shooting through a rock crack at an angle. This is the shot you practice for years and maybe never take. She exhale holds, squeezes. The recoil feels the same as all the others. Downrange, the result is utterly different. The commander's chest snaps back. His legs go out from under him. The handset falls from his fingers and half buries itself in snow. He lands in an awkward sprawl and does not move. For half a second, the ridge goes still. Every man on that slope, friend and foe alike, turns a small, inward eye toward the same thought. What just happened? Then reality rushes back, and panic comes with it. The uncoordinated fire that follows is almost more dangerous in its own way, wild and angry, sent without plan. But panic fire lacks teeth against a moving, thinking adversary. Dalton and his men stagger slide into the shallow fold in the terrain, a slight depression leading toward the backside of the sensor spur. It's not a trench, but but it lowers them just enough to break some lines of sight. Down! Dalton barks, and they hit the snow, chest heaving. He checks the line. Reyes kneeling over Gage again, fingers already probing for fresh bleeds. Mason on one knee, rifle up, arms shaking. Ward and Harker on the lip of the fold, shooting more selectively now. He keys his local. Whoever our ghost is, keep doing God's work. Up on the ridge, the ghost is already dealing with the fact that the enemy is not going to keep obligingly standing in place to be dismantled. One of them has realized the shots are coming from somewhere close. The pattern of impacts is too tight, too effective, too near. They shout, point in a pair of fighters with climbing harnesses and light packs peel off from the main line. They head toward the ridge edge directly above her. Of course, Rourke murmurs. A new sound joins the fight, a high-pitched whine, growing louder. A cheap quadcopter drone pops up from behind a rock, swiveling its little camera, seeking. She watches it through her scope. It's not advanced, but it doesn't need to be. All it has to do is spot an anomalous sparkle or movement under the ridge for someone with a grenade or a rifle to act on. Her ammo count presses at the back of her brain. She's burned more than she'd like to admit. She checks her pouch with her free hand, enough to finish the job if she doesn't waste shots. The drone edges closer, drawn to the rock, seems she's using like a moth to a cracked door. She waits. Snow gusts swirling in front of her crack. The drone's rotors kick the powder, creating its own little vortex. She fires at the point her training tells her the camera must be, not at where the plastic body looks to be through the distortion. The little machine jerks, one arm shearing off. It tumbles in a startled circle, then drops out of sight, its whine cutting off with a crunch. Up top, the two climbers are now almost directly above her, harnesses clipped, boots seeking holds. She can't see both. Her view through the crack is limited, but she hears them, faint scuffs and the rasp of metal on rock. She presses herself flatter into the stone and lets her breathing slow again. They will be expecting a shooter who panics, who tries to run, who tries to fire up at them and exposes her barrel. She does none of those things. She waits until one of them drops low enough that his boot appears in the top fringe of her crack, snow shaking loose from the tread. Then his knee, then the line of his harness. He's looking outward, scanning the basin, his brain wired to the thread in front of him, not the gap beneath. She shifts her rifle an inch, not enough to change her profile from below, enough to bring the muzzle in a line with the center. She fires a single, muffled shot. He topples backward, rope jerking taut, body dangling limp against the ridge face. His partner above yells, grabbing at the line, losing his footing. He scrabbles, regains purchase, and hangs there, torn between climbing down to the unseen threat and getting back to the comparative safety of the crest. He chooses up. That's fine. Up is away from her. Below, in some depression she can't see, a mortar thumps. The sound is deep, less like a gunshot, more like someone striking the earth with a giant mallet. Her spine goes cold. They're bringing tubes into this. The first round lands beyond the basin, too far. Testing distance. The second hits closer, throwing a fountain of snow into the air. Dalton hears it and swears under his breath. They're bracketing us. Mortars are a different sort of threat. You can't outshoot them. You outthink or outrun them. Rourke swivels her scope, searching with urgency now. She doesn't have a great angle on the rear of the enemy position, but through the gap, she glimpses a man lying prone with a small scope on a stick, watching his impacts. Nearby, another man drops mortar rounds into a tube by feel. She can't see the tube clearly. She doesn't need to. The spotter is the real weapon here. She breathes once deep, then takes him. Her shot punches through his shoulder and into his chest. He writhes, knocking his scope askew, fingers clawing at the device. The man on the tube hesitates, caught between helping and continuing his job. He chooses neither, frozen. The next mortar round is launched at a bad angle, tumbles, detonates harmlessly against the side of the ridge. Without someone to call corrections, their heavy weapon becomes noisy but ineffective. The cumulative effect is brutal. From the basin's perspective, it feels like the mountain itself has decided to give them a narrow reprieve. Rounds that had been pinning them begin to go wide or vanish. The most terrifying sounds, airbursts, the crew serves unwavering roar, the precise cracks of the controlled rifle, are gone, replaced by sporadic, angry fire with no clear pattern. Dalton doesn't waste a second of it. "Move!" he barks, grabbing Gage's harness again. "We ride this wave while it's here. Ward, Harker, peel, and cover in order. We're going for that sensor spur." They drag, scramble, skid through the fold, using its shallow angle to reduce their silhouette. The wind pushes at their backs like an ally that doesn't care if it kills them later. Rourke watches them in glimpses between shots, seeing the small, dark figures claw their way toward relative safety. She feels a tight knot between her shoulder blades begin to unwind, just a little. Now she has one more problem: how to tell them where she is and when she's moving without using radios that might still be compromised. She reaches to her sling, fingers finding the little circular disc of her lens cap. She pops it free, angles it toward the basin, and tips it just so. The sun catches the metal and throws a brief, sharp flash down into the fold. 1, 2, 3 pulses in a pattern they'd agreed on in the hut as a backup no one really believed they'd use. Dalton sees it as he hauls Gage over a lip of snow. The flash appears in his peripheral vision, exactly where it shouldn't be. He looks, follows the line up, and realizes she's under the ridge, not on it, exactly where she said she could go. "Ghost is alive," he mutters. Then, louder, "Stay low. Follow the channel. We cut behind the site, not over it." On the ridge, Rourke tucks the cap away, slings her rifle, and begins to reverse her crawl, inching back from the undercut. Her job here is done. Staying would turn a winning position into a tomb. She moves with the same care she used going forward, but now there's a different weight in her limbs, a bone-deep fatigue that isn't just physical. The shakes lurk at the edges, waiting for her to let her guard drop. She doesn't let them in. Only when she reaches the spine and begins to pick her way down toward the ravine, feeding into the same fold the team is using, does she allow herself a thin, unseen smile. For the first time since they stepped into the basin, she believes they might all walk out. Not just because the enemy is weaker, but because the men in that bowl have finally realized the quiet person at their flank was never an experiment. She was the contingency. They approached the sensor site from the backside, using the terrain like a shield. The basin lies behind them now, its surface scarred in erratic patterns of impact and blast. The small housing sits crooked on its spur, metal casing peeled away like a tin can. The snow around it is churned with footprints, more than 6, less than 20. The wind is already smoothing them, but enough remains to tell a story. Ward and Harker fan out, rifles up, clearing around the box. Dalton approaches the access panel with his sidearm drawn, as if the metal might be lying in wait. Up close, the damage looks worse. "Someone knew what they were doing," Reyes mutters, shifting Gage's stretcher to a more stable position in the lee. The compartment for the data module is open, wires torn, but not shredded. The cradle where the module should rest is empty. "Fast hands," Dalton says. They cared more about what was inside than about leaving this thing functional. Rourke steps up beside him, breathing harder now that exertion and adrenaline are finally presenting their bill. She peers into the hollow. "They staged the damage," she says. "Wanted us to see broken, not stolen. Enough to justify a check. Enough to pull us in." Dalton's jaw flexes, and then they turn the whole basin into a trap. Gage groans faintly on the stretcher, reminding them that trap isn't just a word. Why didn't they push harder once they had us pinned? Ward asks, watching the basin rim. They could have chewed us up if they'd thrown more bodies down. Because killing us all wasn't the primary goal, Rourke says quietly. She points to the empty cradle. That was, and maybe one more thing. Later, back at the forward hut, the debrief confirms it. Command has intercepted chatter tying the ambush to a cell that's been probing their communications architecture for months. The sensor site wasn't just another eye on a valley. It was a listening post that had quietly mapped routes, call signs, rhythms. Taking the module gives the enemy a chance to flip the script predict patrols, anticipate operations, set up more precise hits. The ambush in the basin was timing and theater. Hit the response element while or after the module was taken. Try to grab one operator alive, if possible, for videos and bargaining. Demonstrate to their own people as much as to the world that even mountain comms can be blinded at will. We walked into a stage scene, Dalton admits, sitting on the same crate where Reyes had been earlier, helmet off, fingers laced, because we trusted the visible indicators and disregarded the subtle ones. He looks at Rourke. It's not an accusation. Because we trusted habit, he goes on. Because we assumed the worst thing that could happen was a broken box, not a stolen brain. Rourke sits on the floor, near the wall, gear half-stripped. The heater's warmth has finally reached her bones, and with it has come the inevitable tremor in her hands. She hides it by busying herself with weapon maintenance, running a patch through the bore, wiping carbon from the bolt. "What you picked up on the comms check," Dalton says to her. "That pattern hum. Someone testing their jammer," she replies. "Checking they could lean on our pipe without cracking it. And the metal you heard on the wind-up near the basin," he says. "They're set up." "Probably," she says. "I didn't have proof. Just echoes that didn't belong." And the bowl on the map. Harker adds from across the room, where he's retaping a blister heel. "You called it before we ever saw it." She shrugs one shoulder. "It was the obvious place." "Obvious to who?" Ward asks, a faint smile on his lips. "There's no bite there now, just weary respect." Reyes steps out from the small side room, where Gage is lying under blankets in 4 lines. "He's not out of the woods," he says. "But if the bird gets here on the new window, he's got a shot. He's asking what happened out there." "Tell him we got lucky," Dalton says automatically. Reyes snorts. "Lucky doesn't usually smell like cordite and rock dust under your fingernails." Rourke flexes her hand, feeling phantom stone pressure in her palm, compass cool against her chest. Dalton's gaze flicks to that pocket. "That thing," he says. "You carry it because tech fails." She nods. "First winter exercise I ever did, we were running a night navigation course in a different range. Storm rolled in faster than forecast. Snow, wind, the works. GPS went next. Then radios, one by one. Batteries drained faster in the cold than anyone expected. We ended up with 3 guys staring at blank screens and one old instructor with an analog compass and a paper map. She remembers stumbling through dark, white-out inches from her face, the way voices sounded when people realized they were more lost than they'd ever been. "He got us out," she says simply. "The others learned something. So did I." Dalton studies her for a long moment. "You're the only one who stopped to listen before we stepped into that bowl," he says. "To the wind, to the metal, to the noise behind the noise. You saw the trap. We went anyway. That's on me. But the only reason we're all sitting here instead of in a propaganda video is because you remembered what you heard and did something about it." She doesn't know what to do with praise like that, so she cleans the last smudge from her scope and starts reassembling her rifle. There's no ceremony when the team assignments board gets updated. A laminated sheet, erasable marker, the mundane tools of life and death logistics. Dalton walks over to it, glances at the next patrol slot forming on the schedule, and uncaps the marker. Under shooter, Overwatch, he writes a name. Rourke notices later, as she's hanging her gear on its peg. Her name isn't tacked on in parentheses this time. It's not prefaced with alt or attachment. It sits there in simple block letters, as lead. No speech accompanies it. No formal announcement. Respect arrives in the form of changed behavior. The shepherd hut they pass in the chaos is, days later, confirmed occupied. Intel from a follow-up visit says there were 2 civilians inside, huddled in fear during the firefight, listening to rounds crack overhead. One wall is scarred by an errant round. No one inside is hurt. Their restraint, Dalton's refusal to flatten the ridges with blind fire, Rourke's precision on essential targets only, save strangers they never met. That matters. Not in a big, cinematic way. In the quiet, private way that lets you sleep a little better the next week. In the days that follow, as reports stack and analysts draw arrows on slides, Rourke's role in the basin becomes a bullet point in a larger briefing. Friendly element under coordinated ambush. Attached sniper maneuvered to an unanticipated sub-ridge position, neutralized high-value threats, disrupted jamming, enabled disengagement. Enemy exfiltrated with data module. Follow-on ops pending. For the people in the room, it's one story among many. For the people in the basin, it's the only one that matters. On the morning they're due to move again, Rourke steps outside the hut early, before the others are out of their racks. The air is brittle, the sky just beginning to pale. The mountains loom, their ridges etched in hard lines. Far across the valley, the basin is visible as a shallow indentation in the snow, a white bowl rimmed by faint, jagged shadows. Overnight, fresh snow has fallen. From this distance, the basin looks untouched. No tracks, no scars. The mountain is doing what mountains do, slowly, patiently trying to forget. But in her mind's eye, she can still see where Gage fell, where Mason bled, where Reyes shouted into the wind and refused to leave a man behind, where she lay under cold stone and watched the geometry of death and chose, shot by shot, to rewrite it. Dalton steps up beside her, coffee steaming in his hand. He follows her gaze. Looks almost pretty from here, he says. Almost, she agrees. He takes a sip, then nods toward the distant bowl. Place will be a footnote in some after-action report, he says. Coordinates, time on target, loss estimates. He glances at her. But I'll remember it as the spot where one quiet person we almost didn't bring turned out to be the only reason any of us came home. She doesn't answer. There's nothing to add. The sun edges over a peak, sending a shaft of light across the basin. It paints the snow gold, turns every remaining track into a bright scar for a moment before the glare swallows detail. Soon enough, new storms will come. New missions will be briefed. New basins will be crossed. The mountain will keep trying to erase. But for the ones who lay in that wide-out kill zone with comms dead and the world closing in, there will always be a memory of the moment violence went quiet. Because somewhere, invisible, a calm voice with a rifle and an old compass decided she wouldn't let the mountain have them.